האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening. Dobre V'yetcher. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Yitro, and we're going to do Os Ches, section number 8. Before we do, let's take a look at a pasuk from the Parsha that the Zera Shimshon is going to start off with. This is, again, Parshas Yitro, Shmos Perak Yud Ches, pasuk Yud Gimel. After Yitro came to visit, and he was warmly and cordially welcomed by everyone, so the pasuk says, "Vayihimi mocharos," and it was the next day. Vayeshev Moshe lishpot es ha'am, and Moshe sat down to judge the people. Vayamod ha'am, and the people stood al Moshe, on Moshe, min haboker ad ha'orev, from the morning until the evening. So according to the simple reading of the pasuk, Moshe sat down in the morning to judge the people, and all day long, from the morning until the evening, when it got dark, the people waited there in line to be judged by Moshe. And of course, we know the rest of the story, how Yitro said this is not the best way to handle things, and Yitro suggested coming up with to Moshe to develop a court system and different levels of judges so that only the most difficult cases would come to Moshe. But we're going to see that pasuk is going to figure right here in the first paragraph of the Zera Shimshon, Os Ches, section number 8. Shabbos Perakama, in the Gemara Masechah Shabbos in the first chapter. Tani Rav Chia bar Rav midifti. Rav Chia bar Rav, Rav Chia the son of Rav from Difti, taught, Vayamod ha'am al Moshe, and the people stood on Moshe, and then the Gemara refers to the rest of the pasuk from the morning until the evening. V'chitale al datcha v'chulei. And could you ever imagine that Moshe actually was there all day long, literally from the morning to the evening, judging the people? And there are different explanations as to why that would seem to not be feasible in actuality, that he sat there the entire day literally. Ella, but rather call dayon shedon din emes la'amito, but rather what the pasuk is really coming to teach us is that any judge who judges cases emes la'amito, truthfully to his truth, afilu shah achas, even for 1 hour, ma'ala alav hakosuv, the pasuk treats him as if keilu nase shutaf lahakadosh baruch hu b'maseh bereshis, as if he was a partner to Hashem and the creation of the world, v'chule, etc., in that Gemara. So let's pause here for a moment to understand the simple, again, the pshat, the simple way of understanding this statement in the Gemara in Masechah Shabbos. Rav Chia bar Difti feels that we shouldn't understand the pasuk literally, that Moshe actually sat from the morning until the evening all day long judging the people. And therefore, if it's not literally true, then it must be symbolically or metaphorically. It must be, the pasuk must be coming to teach us something by using the expression that Moshe sat there from the morning until the evening judging the people. And so Rav Chia bar Rav midifti says what it's really coming to teach us is that if a person emulates Moshe and judges a case like Moshe did to the absolute truth, and it uses this very important expression, emes la'amito, he judges it in truth to his truth, and even if he does that for only 1 hour, then the Torah says it's as if that person was formed a partnership with Hashem in the creation of the world, where it talks about evening and morning. It uses those same words, boker, erev, and boker, vayerev, vayivoker. And that's what the pasuk is alluding to. So a judge who does that, even if they don't do it all day long, even if they only do that for an hour, then they will be treated like a partner of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Maaseh Bereshis. That's what the Gemara is telling us. That's how the Gemara, I should say, is interpreting the pasuk about Moshe sitting all day long from morning until evening judging the pasuk, judging the people. Continuing, yesh ledaktek, we need to analyze. Mahu la'amito, what does it mean when the Gemara says, adds the word la'amito to his truth or to its truth after the word emes, right? Why couldn't the Gemara just say every judge who judges din emes, he judges truthfully, he judges accurately and correctly and truthfully? Why did the Gemara have to say din emes la'amito, that the judge judges truthfully according to his truth? What does that mean? Zera Shimshon, that's Zera Shimshon's first question. Second question, Uma inyan lazeh, what's the connection between these two things? Meaning, what's the connection between judging a case truthfully and becoming a partner of Hashem in Maaseh Bereshis, in the creation of the world? So the Zera Shimshon poses those two questions on this Gemara in Masechah Shabbos. Next paragraph. Ve'isa be'ela hadivarim rabba. It states in the Medrash Rabbah on the beginning of Parshas Devarim, Amar Rabbi Reuven said, Hosamo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu emes. The seal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of Hashem, is truth. Veloma emes. Why is Hashem's seal called truth? Emes yesh bo gimel osios, because the word emes has three letters. Aleph rishon shel osios. The aleph is the first letter of the aleph base. Mem emtsais. Mem is in the middle of the aleph base. Tuf sofan, and the letter tuf is at the end. So the word emes, which we're being taught in this piece in the Medrash Rabbah, is the seal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Is that word emes is composed of three letters, the first letter in the alphabet, the middle letter in the alphabet, and the last letter in the alphabet. Lomar, which means to say, and now the Medrash is going to quote from a pasuk, as you can see in Yeshaya, Ani rishon va'ani acharon umibil adai ein Elohim. I am first and I am last, and without me there is no God. Only Hashem is a God, is the only God. Hashem is the only God. There is no other deity or God besides Hashem. Vehu ve'echad umi yeshivenu. And it's also teaching us, this you can see is based on a pasuk in Eov, he, meaning Hashem, is one, Umi Yeshivenu, and who can reply to him? Who can have any answer against the statement or ruling made by Hashem? So that's the beginning of the Medrash Rabbah, and it continues. Amar Reish Lakish said, Shahakadosh Baruch Hu don v'chosem le'atzmo. This teaches us that Hashem judges and seals the verdict himself, v'chule, etc. Meaning, Reish Lakish says we see from this idea of the word emes and how that's understood based on these psukim from Yeshai and Eov, that Hashem judges the world and people and everything. Hashem handles all of the judgments that he needs and wants to handle independently, and he handles them himself. And finalizes the verdict himself as well. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Medrash Rabbah. Ve'av ha-medrash hazeh tzorech beyor. Zera Shimshon comments, even this little excerpt from the Medrash requires explanation. My komash malon. What exactly is it coming to teach us? In other words, is it coming just to talk about the word emes and the three letters in the word emes, or is there something more fundamental and more connected to what we've been talking about that it's coming to teach us? So that's you might call that the third question that the Zera Shimshon poses, but basically it's a straightforward question. What can we learn from this medrash about Hashem's method of judging that can shed light on the previous Gemara, the previous excerpt from the Gemara in Masechah Shabbos? Next paragraph. V'yesh lomar, and we can say, Sheba lirmos, it is coming to hint to us, Shedayon echad, that a single judge, Tzorich liton lozeh v'lozeh, ve'achar kach lehachriya, and afterwards to make a determination. So when a judge judges a case by himself, that's called din yechidi. He judges a case by himself, meaning not with the traditional three judges that form a bezdin, and certainly not with the larger amount of judges that you need for a Sanhedrin, a minor Sanhedrin, and a major Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin Hagadol. We're talking about a judge who is allowed to judge certain cases by himself, and he does so. So that judge has to view the case and the litigants in front of him separately. He has to, first of all, take one litigant and say, I need to totally understand the claim of this litigant and understand everything based in this case, everything about this case based on the viewpoint and perspectives of the first litigant. Then he has to look at the case completely, you might say, do a 180 and look at the case completely from the opposite perspective of the other litigant. And afterwards, lehachriya, then he has to make a determination based on the facts and the law to determine what exactly is the Torah's ruling in the case, having looked at it from both perspectives of the different litigants. V'lochein, and therefore, Aleph hu rishon. Now we can go back and understand what did it mean when the Medrash said the first letter of the word emes is the letter Aleph is the first letter in the alphabet. Klomar, this means to say shetoein techila ufoseach lezuchus. This means that if he needs to look at the case from the perspective of the first letter in the alphabet and find merit for the individual that is being judged, or at least the individual whose claim he is considering. The Suf, and then he looks at it from the perspective of the last letter in the alphabet, Sofan Shalosio. Suf, of course, is the last of the letters in the Aleph Beis. Shetoin Lechova. Then he has to look at that from the perspective of a claim of guilty, meaning against this person. So it's easier to understand if you have one litigant that the one person that the judge is judging. So he has to look at everything first to the benefit of this person, to the zechus and the merit of this person. Then he has to switch sides diametrically and look at everything to the chov, as if this person is guilty. Umem emtsois, and the mem of the word ms represents the middle approach. Kemo imiu sham shlosha, as if there were three judges there. She'echad mizakeh, one judge would look at the innocence and focus on that. Ve'echad mechayiv, and one judge would look at finding the person guilty and focus on that. Ve'echad machriya beintayim, and one judge has to make a determination between the views expressed by the other two judges. Ani rishon, I am first lizakos. That means to look at the sides of merit. Va'ani acharon, and I am last, which means to look at the side of guilty. Umi baladai ein Elohim, and without me there is no God. Lahachriya behachra tova, this means to make a good, fair, objective determination after having looked at the case from both possible sides. And how do we know that the pasuk that the Medrash quoted from Yeshaya is a pasuk that talks about judging? Dila'el mineh, because previous to that pasuk, Ksiv, it's written before that pasuk in Yeshaya, moving to the top of the next page on the right column. Hazkireni nishofta yachad. Remind me that we will go and judge together. V'acher kach, and after that pasuk, a few psukim later, ani rishon v'ani achron, I am first and I am last. So the Zera Shimshon is saying that the ideas in the Medrash and the psukim in the Medrash about Hashem And the word emes teach us that when Hashem judges, he looks at all perspectives, and he focuses first on the zechus, on the merit of the person, and then on the chova, and on the possible guilt of the person. And then he makes a hachra, a determination based on all the evidence and all of the perspectives that he considered. And that's what the pasuk is talking about. Ani rishon v'ani acharon, that Hashem judges that way, and then makes his final determination. V'imkein, next paragraph, and if so, Kol hadon din emes la'amito. Going back to this statement from the Gemara in Shabbos, everyone who judges a case truthfully according to his truth, afilu sha'achas, even for 1 hour, klomar, this means to say, shehu dayan yechidi, that we're referring to an individual judge, as we said before, a single judge judging a case. Vidon be'atzmo tanos hazuchus ve'hachova, and he judges by himself the claims of merit and the claims of guilt. Va'achar kach machria beinehem, and afterwards, after considering the perspectives from the different sides, he has to make a determination between them. We're talking about the judge now, the single judge. Karemez milas emes, and this is hinted to by the word emes, truth. Mimidas kono yesh bo. He has the quality of his creator in him. So let's pause for a moment, because the Zera Shimshon has just given us, although we might not have totally realized it, the first answer to the question of what does it mean, don din emes la'amito, judging truthfully according to his truth. And he's answering, if a judge handles the case the way Hashem handles his judgments, where he looks at all possible evidence for the merit and all possible evidence for the guilt, and then makes an objective, clear determination between them. If a human judge does that, then he is done din emes la'amito. He is said to be judging the case not just truthfully, but using Hashem's emes. Amito here is being understood to mean Hashem's truth, because this judge is following the exact procedure that Hashem follows when he judges people. V'siyem hakosov u'mibaladai ein Elohim, and the pasuk concludes with the words, "Without me there is no God." Hashutaf imo isa. This implies that God could have a partner, meaning the pasuk leaves open the door to people emulating Hashem. Hashem says, "Without me there is no God." That, of course, is absolutely true. Hashem is the only God in the universe. However, Hashem can have partners, meaning people who emulate Hashem. V'zehu ki'ilu na'asa shutaf, and this is what the Gemara meant when it says the judge who judges a case, just like Hashem handles his cases, is considered like a partner with Hashem. Ve'omar b'maseh bereshis, and why didn't it just say he's a partner with Hashem? Why did it say he's a partner with Hashem in the creation of the world? Mishum disofe tevos, because if we look at the last letters and the words shel bereshis bara Elokim, in the beginning Hashem created, hu emes, that's the word truth. Let's take a look at it now. Bereshis, the last letter is a suf. Bara, the last letter is an aleph. Elokim, the last letter, as a mem. So we have the 3 letters of the word emes, the suf, the aleph, and the mem. Of course, we have to put them in the different order of aleph, mem, suf, but that's the word emes. So the Gemara says it's not just that this judge who is totally focused on copying Hashem's method of coming to emes, to the truth, la'amito, according to Hashem's truth. He's following Hashem's method of coming to the truth. That person has made his quest, that judge has made his quest and commitment to the emes, to truth, so clear that we refer to him as a partner of Hashem, b'maseh bereshis, where the word emes is expressed right there from the beginning of the Torah in Bereshis, bara, Elokim, saf, aleph, mem, the 3 letters of the word emes. So that's the first explanation that the Zera Shimshon offers. He's going to offer us more additional explanations as we continue, but that's the first one to answer the two questions. One, what did it mean, dan din emes la'amito, judging it truthfully according to his truth, and also what's the connection between a person who does that and being a partner with Hashem in the Maaseh Bereshis. So the Zera Shimshon in this paragraph we just completed answers those questions. Now he's going to give other possible explanations to this. Next paragraph. V'o yesh lomar, and we can also say, Dilif amim mitzad hadin hu poter. Sometimes, in certain cases, by the letter of the law, a person could be exempt. Let's say exempt from paying money. V'habolotzes yedei shamayim chayav. But if the person wants to fulfill his obligation from the heavenly perspective, Yidei Shamayim, then he or she would be obligated to pay. So sometimes that's the case where according to the strict letter of the law, a person might not have to pay money or might be exempt from doing any particular action. However, if the person says, I want to go further than that, I want to be fully Yotzei, not just in terms of how the Jewish courts rule, but min hashamayim, I want to, from the heavenly court, I want to be completely fulfilled all of my obligations, then they might be obligated to actually make a payment or to do some particular action to fulfill the heavenly verdict. V'tavile nami b'volotzeis yedei shamayim. And even when people make a claim against a person, the person can also say, I want to be Yotzei Yedei Shamayim. I want to fulfill my heavenly obligation. Ki de'isa b'per gimel de Metzia, as it states in the third chapter of Bab Metzia, Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, on page 37, side 1. Va'ayin sham b'Tosfos, and you should look there into the Tosfos commentary. V'zehu don din emes. Now we can give another explanation of what the Gemara in Shabbos meant when it says to judge a case truthfully, and then added the word v'la'amito. So he says when the judge judges a case truthfully, according to the emes, dahainu hadin kimo shehu. That means the letter of the law. In a human court, the judge says this is the verdict, and might exempt the person. In our example, might say to the person, according to the din, the essence of the law, you don't have to pay anything or do anything further. You're potter, you're exempt from doing anything. V'la'amito. So now what about that extra word? It's not just emes, but it's v'la'amito, according to its truth or his truth. Ratzolomar, this means to say, b'volotzeis yedei shamayim. But there might be more to do if the person wants to fulfill Yedei Shamayim from the any heavenly obligations that he or she might have. So here, this is a new explanation. And when we look at the word V'la'amito, and according to his truth, it means according to the judge's truth, he would rule differently if the litigant expresses a determination to follow the din, not just in the human court, not in the Jewish Bezdin, but also in Shamayim from the din Shamayim. So if the litigant says that, then the judge is going to make, in some cases, a different ruling. As we mentioned, sometimes a person can be potter, exempt from paying any money by the ruling of the din of the law itself, the letter of the law. But the person, according to the Shamayim, would have to pay in order to clear himself completely minash from the Shamayim's perspective, from the heavenly perspective. So the judge would have to be able and is responsible to tell the person what to do if he or she says, okay, thank you for exempting me, but what about minash shamayim? So the judge needs to say, oh, minash shamayim, let me tell you what you need to do. So that's a second explanation of what it means, emes la'amito. V'cheinu b'shulchan, inami, alternatively, kehahidi amrin and hasan b'mitzia, as we say over there in the Gemara in Bab Metzia, V'cheinu b'shulchan aruch choshen mishpat, and so too it's brought down in the Code of Jewish Law. In the section of choshen mishpat, siman shin, sif aleph, chapter 300, in the first paragraph, Shnayim shehifkidu eitzel echad. If two people deposit money with one guy, so you got two people, let's call them George and Bob. George and Bob deposit money with Joe. Zemona v'zemosayim. This guy gives 100, and this guy gives 200. George gives 100 to Joe, and Bob gives $200 to Joe. And Joe is holding the money. It's a total of $300. He's holding the money for George and Bob. V'chol echad omer sheli mosayim. When it comes time for these two guys to get their money, George and Bob both say, I gave you $200. Well, that's a problem because Joe knows that's factually not true. He knows he only received a total of $300, 100 from one and 200 from the other. And now each guy is trying to claim 200, which means one of them is either mistaken or he's lying. And he's trying to get back 200 when he only deposited 100. Yitain masayim lazeh umasayim lazeh. The Joe, who the money was given to, must return 200 to each of them. V'yafsid mona mi beso, and he will lose 100 from his house, meaning of his own money. Why in the world should he pay back $100 more than they gave him and lose $100 of his own money? Mipnei sheposha, because he was negligent. Because he should have been careful to write down exactly which one gave him 200 and which one gave him 100, or to bring witnesses to watch the guys give him the money, in which case the witnesses could now come and solve the whole problem, and they could say, this one gave 200 and this one gave 100. George, let's say, gave the 100 and Bob gave the 200, but he didn't write it down and he didn't get them to sign anything, and he doesn't have witnesses, so it's his fault. His negligence, or you might say his naivete, but his lack of handling the situation correctly led to this problem, and therefore he has to pay each guy back 200, in which case he's going to lose $100, as we said. V'inhu lo tavile kol echad bivari. But what about if the two guys, in our case, George and Bob, what if they lo tavile kol echad bivari? They do not each of them make a definite claim, right? What if the two guys who gave him money are also not so sure about what happened, and they come and say, for example, I think I might have given you 200, but I'm not positive. I could have been the one who gave you 100. And the other guy says, yeah, same thing with me. I don't remember. Did I give you the 200 or did George give you the 200? I'm not sure. They're not sure who gave the 200 and who gave the 100. So they're also not clear. So in that case, he would not have to pay them both back 200. However, but if he wants to be fulfilled from the heavenly perspective, then he is obligated to pay back each 200. But in the laws of man, in a Jewish court, they would say you're exempt from giving each guy 200 because they themselves weren't careful to write it down or to even remember how much they gave you. And if they're not sure, then you don't have to pay them back each 200 and lose $100 yourself. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Gemara in Bava Metzia and in the Shulchan Aruch. Now the Zera Shimshon is going to bring in Tosfos. So Tosfos Kosvu Sham. And Tosfos writes over there, bottom of the column. Tosfos writes over there, Perikama de Shabbos, in the first chapter of Maseches Shabbos, Al Hahidid Dun Din, on this person who judges a case, top of the next column, Emes La'amito, according to the truth, to his truth. He judges it truthfully according to his truth. La'afuke din mirumeh. Tosfos says this is to exclude. Judging a case, emes la'amito, means you're not going to have a fraudulent verdict. Ad kan l'shono, until here is a quote from Tosfos. So Tosfos offers a new interpretation of what the words emes la'amito mean. And Tosfos says what it means is you can't end up with a verdict which looks true, but is actually fraudulent. V'chavonos divreihem, and the intention of Tosfos's words are, shahadayon mechuyev ladun al pi ha'emes shenis'ames lo. The judge has to judge the case according to the truth that is truthful to him. V'zehu la'amito. And this is what it means, to his truth, from the judge's perspective, what is true. V'lo al pi hata'ano shel balei dinim, and he's not limited to the claims made by the litigants in the case. A judge shouldn't just say, well, there are two litigants and I have to rule according to one of them, and so that's it. I just have to decide which one of these two guys I think is telling the truth. No, he doesn't. He has to take into his own understanding of the facts of the case. If the litigants contradict what appears to be true, then he has to follow his own understanding of the facts. Kemoshe Kosov Sma, B'choshen Mishpat, as the commentary, the Sma, sefer Me'iros Einayim, writes on Choshen Mishpat section of Shulchan Aruch, Siman Tesvav, Sif Katan Tesvav. V'im eno boror lo ha'emes, and if the truth is not clear to him, forget what the litigants say. If the judge, it's not clear to the judge what the truth is, Yesalek atzmo min hadin hahu, he should remove himself from that case. K'moshe kosav b'shulchan aruch sham sif gimel v'ayin sham, as it says in the Shulchan Aruch over there. So Zera Shimshon says, let's bring in Tosfos to offer a whole new interpretation of emes la'amito, because until now we had the emes according to Hashem's emes, meaning judge a case the way Hashem does. We also had emes where the judge follows the litigant's desire, the expressed desire of the litigant to not only fulfill requirements of the Bezdin, but also the requirements of Bezdin Shalmala, of the heavenly court. And so the judge says, oh, let me tell you what you need to do to fulfill that higher level of justice and of judgment. And now Tosfos says the judge has to use his own independent knowledge and understanding of everything that's presented to him to make sure that the verdict is true and that he understands it as being true. If he can't reach that point, then he has to put aside what the litigants might have claimed and say, I'm have to recuse myself, and we're going to bring in a new judge because I cannot be 100% absolutely certain that I can issue a ruling that is not only true based on what the litigants are saying, but true based on myself and my own understanding of the case. So he steps away and another judge comes in and hopefully is able to resolve the case accurately. Next paragraph. Umnum. However, nidon zeh shel mono mosayim, in this case of the $100 and the $200 that got deposited with a person, that's our case of George and Bob and Joe. So Joe was given $300, but now they're claiming he owes them each $200 for a total of $400. That's the case we discussed previously. Afal pisha b'vada yesh bo ramaus, even though there certainly is something not true about that case, meaning one of the two guys who's claiming he gave 200 is definitely saying something false, right? Because we know one guy gave 100 and one guy gave 200. If both guys claim they gave 200, then one of them is either lying, like we said, or mistaken. Afilu hachi, nevertheless, yochel hadayin ladun, the judge can rule in that case. A judge is allowed to rule in the case even when one of the litigants is clearly lying. Ulechayv hanifkad litain v'chulei shtei monim lezeh shtei monim lezeh. A judge could, depending on the situation, rule that the guy who the money was deposited with, Joe, has to give each guy back 200. Afal pisha hu din meruma, even though he's going to be issuing a ruling in a case when someone's lying. So why should he do that? Mishum di'iboy le'lemedak, because as we said before, the man who received the money has a responsibility to check and make sure to set up a process by which he can know for sure which guy gave him 200 and which guy gave him 100. And he didn't do that. Vizehu la'amito hu hayololios nizhar midin meruma. And this is another way to understand according to his truth, meaning that he needed to be careful. The guy who the money was deposited with needed to be particularly careful to make sure that no false result could come out. So he had to, as we said, write down who gave him 100, who gave him 200, have witnesses on who gave him 200, who gave him 100, umidalo nizhar, from the fact that he wasn't careful to do this. Shma mino delo kafet. We see from this that he himself is not being careful and doesn't care about the 200 and the 100 to make sure he got it right. According to this, he's going to have to pay each guy 200 according to the truth as it was clarified by him, meaning his own action showed that he didn't care about determining who gave him 200 and who gave him 100. So then the truth is that he needs to pay 200 to each in order to resolve a problem that his negligence created. Now the Zera Shimshon is going to move past, in this last paragraph, past the different explanations that he's presented about what does it mean, emes la'amito, and he's going to talk about a different point altogether, which is this mentioning of shah achas, if a judge judges for 1 hour. Let's do that. V'im tomar, and if you say, meaning if you ask, heicha remiza shah achas b'pasuk, how is there any allusion or hint to the idea of judging for 1 hour in the pasuk? The ka'amar that the Gemara said, call dayan shedon afilu sha'achas, every judge who judges truthfully even for 1 hour. So Zera Shimshon is going back to the very beginning, to the Gemara in Shabbos that he started with, and he's saying, how did anyone come up with this idea that if a judge judges for 1 hour, then he gets the credit of being a partner of Hashem? Where was 1 hour mentioned? 1 hour wasn't mentioned anywhere in the pasuk. V'yesh lomar, and we can say sheha, the letter he, dehaboker, in the word the morning, meyuteres, is extra. The pasuk said that Moshe sat and judged the people from haboker, from the morning, ad ha'erev, until the evening. It certainly didn't need to use the letter hey there. Didai hayolomar, it would have been sufficient for the pasuk to say min boker ad erev, from morning until evening. It didn't have to say from the morning until the evening. And the Zera Shimshon here could focus on the two hays, but he's focused on the letter hey before the word boker, and he's saying that letter hey and the word haboker is definitely superfluous, and it must come to teach us something. Definitely it is coming to teach us shelo hayoshev kol haboker, that Moshe was not sitting there all morning, ela techilas haboker. He was there for the beginning of the morning. If the words in the pasuk were min boker ad erev, from the morning to evening, yes, then that would seem to indicate he was literally there all day. But haboker, from the morning, tells us he was there for only part of the morning. Dahainu, kashiur shemealos hashachar ad hanetzachama. That means he was there for the beginning portion of the morning, which is the amount of time that passes from dawn until the actual sunrise. So alos hashachar is dawn, the very, very first appearance of light in the east. It's still very dark everywhere, but a little bit of light appears in the east, the first appearance of light. That's called alos hashachar, the dawn, the beginning of the dawn. Ad hanetzachama, until the sun comes up, sunrise. Ve'eno rak sha'achas bekeruv. In that period of time between alos hashachar and netzach hama, between dawn and sunrise, is only about an hour approximately. There are actually different opinions in Chazal about how long exactly is it between dawn and sunrise, but let's call it approximately an hour. Ve'af ha'hei de'haboker mashmahachi. And the specific letter hey, not only is hey an extra letter, which tells us it's part of the morning or the beginning of the morning, but it also has a very specific meaning because it represents the letter 5. Hey in gematria equals the number 5. Dahainu hey milin boker, which means that the morning, the beginning of the morning, equals the time it takes to walk. Hey milin, 5 milin. A mil is a Talmudic measurement, an ancient measurement that equaled 2,000 amos. So the beginning of the morning between dawn and sunrise is the time it takes for a person to walk 5 milin, a distance of 10,000 amos. Sha'omru zichronim levracha, Chazal said, me'alos hashachar hanetzach hama chamisha milin. From dawn until sunrise equals the time it takes to walk 5 milin. And therefore, the Zera Shimshon says the letter Hey is doing two things. It's teaching us that Moshe only set in judgment for part of the morning, for the beginning of the morning, and then it hinted to us exactly how long that is, specifically the time it takes for a person to walk 5 milin, which in Chazal ranges from about 72 minutes, which is very close to the 60-minute hour, up until 90 minutes, or even there's an opinion 120 minutes. But the Zera Shimshon's point is, he's answering his question, how did the Gemara know that a judge only has to judge for about an hour to get this tremendous merit of being a partner with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the creation of the world? Answer from the words min haboker ad ha'erev, specifically the extra hey, telling us part of the morning, specifically the time between dawn and sunrise, which is about an hour, a little more than an hour. Yasher koch to learning for learning in the Zera Shimshon with us this week. We look forward to learning together in the Zera Shimshon next week.